Welcome to BDO's Legal Tech Talk podcast. We're joined by judges and legal professionals to discuss emerging trends, regulatory updates, and the latest headlines. We'll provide tips to help your law firms and legal departments make the most out of legal technology. I'm Daniel Gold, BDO Principal and eDiscovery Managed Services Leader.
And I'm Eric Dirk, BDO's Managing Director of Legal Operations. Let's get started with this episode's exciting discussion.
And welcome back to another special edition of BDO's Legal Tech Talk podcast. This is great. We are still here live at Running Legal Like a Business here in Las Vegas. And Eric, we are now joined with the one and only Derek Mock. He is with Munich Re America Services, the head of legal operations. Really excited to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, why don't we start off nice and easy and just, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what does that mean to be the head of legal operations at Munich Re America Services?
Sure. So I support a team of about 70 lawyers and other legal and compliance professionals, and our team or department supports the U.S. property and casualty operations of Munich Re.
One of the interesting things that you had said is that you're here at this conference, not just to be at this conference, but that you actually co-led a session on strategic planning, correct?
Yes.
And so what does that mean in the context of legal operations to host a session on strategic planning? What is it that you do that you are able to stand up there and talk to everybody about here's how to plan within a legal department?
So legal operations is uniquely positioned to support whether it's a CLO or a GC through the strategic planning process. And the real value that I think is consistent with what Connie and Jeff have done for running legal like a business is aligning legal with the business. And so what Elaine Darr of DHL and I shared with the audience is how to develop a business-aligned strategic plan. And we took it from the corporate vision, mission, values, initiative, SWOT analysis, and then couple that with what the department has, either if they have a vision and mission or if they go straight to a SWOT and then developing strategic initiatives that are quantifiable. And so you have kind of an OKR or objectives and key results approach so that we're tying the work of the department expressly to how the business talks and what the business needs.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel's a big OKR fan, so am I. How does the business, when you align your legal operations goals to the business, how does the business of the legal operations team respond? You said you support 70 lawyers?
Yes. Well, not just lawyers, but about 35 lawyers and the balance other professionals.
This is traditionally a group of folks who are not used to being managed by OKRs. How do you encourage them and think through like pros and cons? And maybe it's not always about benefits, but sometimes it's about, maybe corrective action on not meeting. How do you work with a legal team that traditionally hasn't been geared to think like that?
Some of us don't like being measured in the way that sales or marketing might be. And so what Elaine and I shared was here are ways to take the strategic initiatives. So if that's the objective, and then you align those with the key results or what we're going to do. So for example, if a team needs a regulatory change management tool, a horizon scanning tool, because they need to know what the laws and regulations in the different jurisdictions that they operate in, are they changing? Are they evolving? What's happening? Could we put a deadline on that? Where, okay, if our current tool is going to sunset in fourth quarter, we should probably map backwards and figure out, hey, we need some viable candidates by Q2. We need to complete the demos by Q3. We need to have a recommendation together with either procurement or finance or the business, if appropriate, to the CLO by a certain date. So dates are one way, Eric, to have the measurable, quantifiable aspect of the key results for lawyers who aren't used to that. Or you can talk about a percentage of process efficiency, or if your department uses a lot of outside counsel, the spend, contract cycle time. There are things that are at the fingertips of our peers, but they just may not have had the experience or the tools to make those into OKRs or key results. And so legal operations can help the leadership of the department introduce that concept and then talk the language of the business.
I'm going to have some fun here, Derek. So what our listeners can't see is the second that you said OKRs, my eyes lit up because that's something I talk about all the time at BDO. In fact, actually, Eric just rolled his eyes. And so the reason why I want to have a little fun with this with you here is because, so when I think through objectives and key results, and for all of our listeners who haven't heard of OKRs, this has been something that's been around for quite some time. It was popularized by John Doerr, who used to be at Intel, went over to Google and, gave this talk when Google was very, very young. And then as a result of Google hearing it, the co-owners of Google, it became massive. And Google is who they are today because of objectives and key results. And many other books that are out there today have actually tried to mimic that. And there's the 4DX, there's the 12-week cycle, a lot of various different approaches, but none of them are as good as the original, which is objectives and key results. And when we talk about objectives and key results, it's different than KPIs. KPIs being key performance indicators, because KPIs are, I've got a sales goal to hit, and here's how I'm going to go ahead and set the sales goal, as you said before. Objectives I often look at, though, as being that there is an overall mission statement or overall umbrella goal that the law department, for instance, needs to hit for the year. And then each of the OKRs, the objectives are very lofty. And then they are going to have the key results based on around how lofty that objective is. When you're talking about like a regulatory change management tool, is that lofty? I mean, is that as lofty as it could be, or is it maybe the objective is to have a forward-leaning legal department that has its eye on driving efficiency by X, right? And so it's the way they're going to go about doing that is having a better contract management tool or a better regulatory change management tool, et cetera.
Yes, I don't know if you were sitting in on the session yesterday that Elaine and I shared, but what's interesting about your question is we look at it along a continuum. So when you're focused on the aspirational parts, as I'm listening to your question, that's really the potential vision and mission statement and values of the department to define who they are, who we are, and who we want to be for the business. That's where the lofty would come in, and it's very helpful, and it helps align the legal department with the business again by having the strategic initiatives that are clear. So those are the objectives. So for example, if there were a company that was in the discount grocery space and they had to expand by acquisition and also building new stores, the cycle, the pace of all the contracts and agreements would be a very important part of that success. So the legal department could look at and see, do we have workflow automation? Do we have CLM or other tools? And if not, then the objective, for example, could be to speed the cycle time of these agreements. The key result would be we want to automate a certain percentage. We want to speed it by X number of days or weeks, and then, by when. And so what Elaine and I shared was you can take it from the corporate goal of this expansion to the department initiative. I'll just switch language with you. That's we need to accelerate the time. And then we identify a team to execute it. So we give opportunity to people in the department, whether they're informal leaders or high potential people. How do we tap them? And then are there business partners that we need to join or stakeholders? And then do what by when? And then the key to help the general counsel, because we're always thinking about how we align our leaders with the business leaders, is then if we follow the process that we shared, you come out with a quarter by quarter ability to report on progress in quantifiable ways, percentages, timeline, dollars, and use a stoplight, red, yellow, green, are we on track? Then they can communicate to their sales peer or the CEO or if it's up to a CLO, here's how we're doing on accelerating the contract. Here's how we are adding value to the business.
Yeah, you mentioned an interesting phrase there, if we follow the process. And what happens when something happens to a business or a condition of the business that forces you to shift the process? Because, hey, there's a new thing, we've got to adapt that process or that project or that program needs to be set aside, so our OKRs need to change. How do you deal with the ever-changing nature of business requires one to adopt? And I think we sometimes, Daniel, I'm not picking on you, but we get set in OKRs and we almost forget to go back and say, okay, we remember there are 3 things that changed. And here's how we dealt with those changes. And here's how we updated. So tell me a little bit about how you incorporate the ever-present idea of change into what might look like static means to measure.
Yeah. And so this is a really entertaining position to be in. Kind of, it's like an appellate argument where the justices are arguing with each other through me about OKR. So I can see that you guys have had this conversation.
We
in
have
the
a few
past.
debates.
Just a couple of them.
So what I say, Eric, is that to accommodate the change, and I can't remember which general said this, you might, but the best laid plans.
Patton.
Yeah, it was Patton about they don't survive first contact. And that doesn't mean that strategic planning isn't valuable, and that in many cases it's going to be able to be executed on as it was written. But we know that the business is going to change. We might get a new CEO. We might have an election. We might have a new CLO. There might be something in the economy that changes, or our client base, or who knows. So to your point, change can happen. And what we would bake into the process that Elena and I offered is the flexibility to pivot with the business and not view that as failure. Because again, the only reason the legal department exists is to serve the business, to add value to the business. So if it was 1, 2, and 3 in the fourth quarter when we were planning, but by second quarter, it's D, E, and F.
Adopt or die.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the way that I look at it as well.
Legal teams are struggling to manage resources, maintain compliance, and adopt new technologies. BDO's legal operations team can help. We enhance efficiency, reduce costs, and support compliance so you can run your legal department like a business. Schedule a meeting with us today at BDO.com.
The other thing that strikes me about the insurance business in general is traditionally perceived as a very old business, like a banking business. So you're at this conference and you're seeing all these really cool, innovative technologies, and you've been at a few of them. How do you introduce new tricks to maybe old dogs? How do you introduce new ideas and technologies, innovative ways of working with tools and new processes into somewhat of an antiquated, I'm not saying your company's antiquated, but maybe the vertical is perceived as antiquated. So how do you get people jazzed about new technology and new ways of thinking? Yeah,
so the insurance sector or industry is surprisingly interested in and paying attention to technology. So this may be another podcast episode with other guests, but the whole field of insurtech and how they are incorporating and leveraging cutting edge technology. You have a lot of digital first or AI first insurers. So as an industry, some may resemble that remark, Eric, but not everyone. And so for our department, there are a lot of people who are tech savvy, lawyers and others. So it doesn't fit the mold or the stereotype that you shared. But to bring it back to the first part of your question, when I'm on the exhibit floor, when I see the vendors who I may or may not have spoken with before the conference or generally aware of their products, looking at what our use cases and needs are and not try to find the application of all the tools.
I'm thinking about my experience with really old carriers, but a lot of people will buy technology without thinking through the problem that they're trying to solve first. So when they come, they get sold, they buy something, and then they forget that there's actual practical ways that they need to incorporate and apply the tools. And sometimes that's a hard sell, right? So how do you think about process plus technology as equal partners in solving a business problem?
So one layer is budget, to think about what's possible. And we could recommend something that we think is going to be critical or improve in a material way. So along the continuum of, can we solve it with an existing tool in our toolbox at work? And there are some great sessions still to come this week about how to use what might already be in your toolbox. So start there, or figure out, here's our use case, and then build it and talking to your department peers and also the business to say, hey, here's a tool that we think would help us, whether it's advance the cycle time or to be a better aware of the legal and regulatory change management. So that's the process. And I also acknowledge what you were talking about, Eric, with the focus on the shiny new object. And for the past 3 years, if you're not talking about AI, you're perceived as behind the times. And so in insurance, there may be some carriers who are old school and like their spreadsheets and paperwork. But I tell you, there are a lot of people across the industry, some of whom have attended conferences like this, but you could identify probably at every carrier someone who's forward thinking, whether they're a digital leader, transformation leader, claim leader, legal leader. They're looking for ways to integrate the technology to serve their customers. So much like the department wants to serve the business, I know that the industry or the vertical is very much wanting to accelerate that.
There's a lot of conferences that you could attend, right? And this is not the first time you've been to this one. What is it about what Connie and Jeff have built here at the Running Legal Like a Business conference that attracts you to wanting to come back here and especially and speak here?
Yeah, I was grateful for the opportunity that Jeff and Connie gave Elaine and me just to share what we've done in the past and what could help each other. And that ties in, Daniel, I think, to one of the key benefits here is there's a growing number of peers in the community across legalops.com or Running Legal Like a Business. And I've found that the sessions are more impactful and I hear from more of my peers and I'm able to focus on that community. And there may be other experiences where that isn't always, or at least as consistently the case.
One last question for you. So, you come here and you accumulate all this great knowledge, right? And you learn about what some of the providers have as well. That's a really profound gift of knowledge that you accumulate. When you go back to the office, so to speak, virtual or otherwise, how do you intend on giving that gift back to others to educate them on what you have learned?
It's probably going to be a time delay, Daniel, in the sense that I need to digest, like I've received, and now I need to digest and see, okay, this may be applicable to one team or one person to be able to share. Others require a little bit more thought that if I'm going to propose it to the CLO, hey, saw this great thing, I'm going to need some backup or context for that. So the process is digest once you're back to the office, collect some thoughts, and then to be able to share maybe some highlights to test if there's more interest or to drive focus, and not from the session that Elaine and I did, but for a strategic planning perspective, what are those things, comments, new information that I could contribute and offer for discussion?
It's funny, we don't really give ourselves a lot of time right now to deliberate and think and process. We're always out there looking for an immediate answer. And so like your idea or your thought about how you actually need time to process isn't something that people think about right now. We really think about taking in information, spitting it back out in the most effective way. And that's what AI is trying to do. So what you just said is like, if people are out there listening to this, I think it's a really cool idea. Like, you just received a whole bunch of stuff, let it settle, be careful, be mindful, and then put together your business case or your solution set.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know what you like to do in your off hours, Eric, but I like to run. And so some of the ideas come to me when I'm running. And so whether it'll be this time or not, the reason I share that is I hope to draw connections across multiple sessions that I attended that I may not have made, but it'll come to me Saturday or it'll come to me Sunday.
I'm not surprised that was your answer, given your love of OKRs and how you've implemented them. So I'm not surprised to hear that you're very methodical about that. And I agree that taking the time to think is at a premium. It's almost at a scarcity these days.
I believe that's why GCs and CLOs want and appreciate legal operations support, because they've got everything coming at them. And if you can be a wise counselor to them and have not take forever, but if you can have that thoughtful response, that's value add.
What a great way to close. Derek, it was so nice to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on BDO's Legal Tech Talk podcast.
If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe for more episodes.
On BDO.com, you'll find all of our episodes, transcripts, and ways to continue the conversation.
Until next time, this has been another episode of BDO's Legal Tech Talk.